In the early 20th century, the Russian Empire was on the brink of collapse. Centuries of autocratic rule under the Romanov dynasty left the nation ripe for change. Widespread poverty, military defeats, and a rigid social hierarchy fueled unrest. In 1917, mass protests erupted in Petrograd, swiftly spreading across the country. The Tsar, Nicholas II, was forced to abdicate, marking the end of imperial rule. The revolution paved the way for the rise of the Bolsheviks and the birth of Soviet Russia. The Russian Revolution, the fall of the Tsars. Picture this: a man who believed himself chosen by God to rule over 1/6 of the world's landmass would, within a single year, find himself cowering in a basement, stripped of everything, awaiting execution alongside his entire family. This isn't fiction. This is the story of how 3 centuries of Romanov rule crumbled in just 300 days. The gilded cage of absolute power. The year was 1913, and Tsar Nicholas II stood on the balcony of the Winter Palace, watching 300,000 subjects celebrate the tercentenary of Romanov rule. Cannons thundered, church bells rang across St. Petersburg, and the crowd roared, "God save the Tsar!" Yet beneath this magnificent spectacle, the foundations of the world's largest empire were already cracking. Nicholas II wasn't born to be Tsar. As the second son, he had lived in the shadow of his elder brother George until tuberculosis claimed the heir in 1899. When Nicholas unexpectedly ascended the throne in 1894, he confided to his cousin, "I am not prepared to be Tsar. I never wanted to become one. I know nothing of the business of ruling." These words would prove prophetic. The Tsar ruled over an empire spanning 11 time zones, home to 126 million people speaking dozens of languages. But this vast realm was a powder keg. While Western Europe industrialized, Russia remained largely feudal. 90% of the population were peasants, many still bound to the land by crushing debt and tradition. The gap between the glittering court life in St. Petersburg and the brutal reality of rural Russia was a chasm that would ultimately swallow the monarchy whole. Blood on the snow. The Revolution of 1905. The first crack in the Tsarist facade came not from within, but from a disastrous war with Japan. In 1904, Nicholas II, seeking to distract from domestic troubles, launched an attack on Japanese positions in Manchuria. The world watched in shock as the mighty Russian bear was mauled by what they considered an upstart Asian power. The Baltic fleet's humiliating destruction at Tsushima became a symbol of Russian incompetence. But it was January 9th, 1905, Bloody Sunday, that truly shattered the myth of the benevolent Tsar. Father Gapon, a charismatic Orthodox priest, led a peaceful march of 200,000 workers to petition Nicholas II for better conditions. They carried icons, sang hymns, and believed their little father would hear their pleas. Instead, imperial troops opened fire on the unarmed crowd. Over 1,000 men, women, and children lay dead in the snow. Here's where the story takes its first dramatic turn. In a single afternoon, centuries of sacred trust between Tsar and people evaporated like morning mist. The 1905 revolution erupted across the empire. Workers struck, peasants burned manor houses, and even the military mutinied, most famously aboard the battleship Potemkin. Nicholas II, faced with the collapse of his authority, made unprecedented concessions. He agreed to a constitution and elected parliament, the Duma, and basic civil liberties. For a moment, it seemed Russia might evolve into a constitutional monarchy. But Nicholas II never truly accepted these limitations. "I created the Duma not to be directed by it, but to be advised," he declared privately. Over the following years, he systematically undermined parliamentary power, dismissing Duma that opposed him and rigging elections. The window for peaceful reform was slowly but inexorably closing. The mystic and the monarchy's fatal wound. Enter one of history's most enigmatic figures, Grigory Rasputin, the mad monk, whose influence over the royal family would accelerate the dynasty's downfall. When the Tsarevich Alexei was diagnosed with hemophilia, a carefully guarded state secret, the desperate Tsarina Alexandra turned to faith healers. Rasputin, a Siberian peasant with piercing eyes and an alleged ability to heal, became the only person who could seemingly stop the boy's potentially fatal bleeding episodes. Whether through hypnosis, herbs, or sheer coincidence, Rasputin's interventions worked. But his presence at court scandalized Russian society. This unwashed peasant, known for his drinking and womanizing, was rumored to have immense influence over state policy through the Tsarina. Our friend, as Alexandra called him, became a symbol of everything wrong with the monarchy, its isolation, its mysticism, its apparent corruption. The situation became critical when World War I erupted in 1914. Nicholas II, in a fateful decision that sealed his fate, chose to personally command the army at the front. This left the deeply unpopular German-born Alexandra effectively ruling Russia, guided by Rasputin's whispered advice. Every military defeat, every shortage, every civilian death was now laid directly at the Tsar's feet, the perfect storm of 1917. But here's the twist that makes this story truly extraordinary. The revolution that would topple the Romanovs wasn't orchestrated by professional revolutionaries. It began with women standing in bread lines. By early 1917, Russia was bleeding to death. 2.5 million soldiers had died, the economy had collapsed, and food shortages plagued the cities. On March 8th, February 23rd in the old Russian calendar, International Women's Day, female textile workers in Petrograd took to the streets demanding bread. Within days, their demonstration had snowballed into a general uprising. The crucial moment came when Nicholas II ordered troops to fire on the protesters. But this time, the soldiers refused. Regiment after regiment joined the revolution. The mighty imperial army, backbone of Tsarist power for centuries, simply melted away. Nicholas II, isolated at military headquarters, received a telegram that must have chilled him to the bone. The situation in the capital is serious. There is anarchy in the capital. It is necessary immediately to entrust a person who enjoys the confidence of the country with the formation of a new government. On March 15, 1917, in a railway car at Pskov station, Nicholas II signed his abdication. 300 years of Romanov rule ended not with a bang, but with a stroke of a pen. The man who had once commanded 126 million subjects was now simply Citizen Nicholas Romanov. The final act, from palace to basement. The provisional government that replaced the Tsar faced an impossible choice. What to do with the deposed royal family? Initially held under comfortable house arrest at their beloved Alexander Palace, the Romanovs lived in a strange twilight existence, no longer rulers but not yet private citizens. But Russia's agony was far from over. Lenin's Bolsheviks, promising peace, land, and bread, seized power in October 1917. For them, the existence of the former Tsar represented a dangerous rallying point for counter-revolution. As civil war erupted across Russia, the royal family was moved to increasingly harsh captivity, finally ending up in a merchant's house in the Ural city of Yekaterinburg. The end came on the night of July 16 to 17, 1918. Local Bolshevik leader Yakov Yurovsky entered the basement where the family was being held and announced they were to be moved for their safety. Instead, he and his men opened fire. Nicholas II, Alexandra, their 4 daughters, young Alexei, and 4 loyal servants were murdered in a hail of bullets. To ensure no remains could become relics, the bodies were doused with acid and buried in unmarked graves. The echo of gunshots. The execution of the Romanov family marked more than the end of a dynasty. It symbolized the violent birth of the modern world. The Russia that emerged from the revolution would become the Soviet Union, a communist superpower that would shape the 20th century through world wars, Cold Wars, and space races. Yet perhaps the most haunting aspect of this story is how preventable it all seemed. Had Nicholas II genuinely embraced constitutional monarchy after 1905, had he stayed out of World War I, had he dismissed Rasputin and reformed the government, any of these decisions might have saved his throne and his life. Instead, the last Tsar of Russia became a cautionary tale about the price of absolute power in an age of mass politics. The man who once believed he ruled by divine right discovered that in the end, power flows not from God, but from the consent of the governed. And when that consent is withdrawn, even the mightiest throne becomes nothing more than an empty chair. The gunshots in that Yekaterinburg basement didn't just end the lives of 11 people. They marked the moment when the old world died and the modern age was born in blood and revolution.